Hey, everybody, welcome to Oregon Wants You, even if you don't want Oregon. It's going to be a discussion about Oregon licensing requirements as it pertains to non-resident tax practitioners. My name is John Shuey. I'm here in New York. I have with me today Ed Moore, an enrolled agent and NTPI fellow at a large block franchise group in Texas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And I have Chad Magnum with me, who he lives in Utah, but works for an Oregon licensed tax consultant. So I think everybody's going to give a bunch of different perspectives as we talk about some of this. If you have questions, as always, the best place to put them is in the Q&A tab on the right side. If you're new to us, pop your question in the Q&A tab. I can then put it up on the screen. Everyone can see the question and we can answer it as we go along. So questions as we go along, of course, are always appreciated. This is me. Welcome to our program. I'm always happy that we're able to offer these things free to our friends in the industry as we see an evolving issue that might be affecting a bunch of us. Based on today's very nice turnout, I would say that we have that thing. So I know Ed originally from the Oklahoma Society of Enrolled Agents Board, the Education Committee. He made the mistake. He hired me one year to come out and speak. Ed's been with Block for 18 years. You occasionally see him going to their town hall in Kansas City. He's an NTPI fellow as well. And I copied his bio from the H&R Block website. Ed, you have anything interesting also to tell us about yourself?
Well, it's interesting of the circumstances that got us here, and I'll give a little more detail when we talk about preparation for the exam.
Okay.
But my first experience was when I went to help my brother, who happens to live in Oregon, with a nanny tax type issue, and discovered that I could not represent him. So that was kind of the genesis of my motivation to take care of all of this.
Oh my, yeah. The Oregon state is very interesting with some of those rules and how they've changed. Chad is an enrolled agent as well, has a master's degree in taxation. I was surprised. So he works for somebody who's in one of my coaching programs, and we were chatting about staffing needs. And I said, what are you going to do about the licensing issues? Because she went from local staff to some remote staff. And she said, well, the main person already went and got licensed. I said, what? And then we that's when your ears kind of blew up, Chad, and got red. So, but Chad is an enrolled agent, and he has a decade of experience in tax prep, resolution, advisory services, has a master of tax, which is always helpful. He's worked previously at a law firm working in tax, and apparently he can't hold a job. He's worked at multiple accounting firms and places around.
Good for it.
Chad, you have anything good to tell us before we get going?
I guess an interesting fact about me is my bachelor's degree is in biology. And a lot of people, kind of cock their heads at that. Like, how does that relate to taxes? And to me, it does very well because, biology is in the sciences. It's very analytical. There's problem solving and research. Then you move over here to tax, and it's basically the same thing, but with numbers.
Interesting analogy. Biology people also like to pick things apart. Oh, all right. So I do have to pay the bills. I'm going to have to give you one commercial. If you're not a subscriber, this is what we do. We do 24 to 30 hours of new education every month. We have 2 proprietary programs that are for members only. Most things you can buy on this just one-off purchase. We have an international class once a month. Rita Ryan, an attorney in Boston, and we have Knox Wimberly doing a cybersecurity series. Every month you get at least 2 hours of Knox. That's included in the $52, plus the monthly theme of content that's 24 to 30 hours of material, plus 300 hours of recorded material. So we probably have a class on what you need. You probably know most of the speakers who are here. You'll at the end of the webinar, you'll get the link to sign up if you're interested or to learn more. So how do we get here? Let's talk. Why are we talking about this? So Oregon law mandates that an individual who prepares, advises, or assists in the preparation of an Oregon personal income tax return for compensation must be licensed by the Oregon Board of Tax Practitioners. And that's in ORS 673.615. That's the law. So probably for about 40 years or so, we ignored this because, as we all know, there's that somebody said, now we have TikTok. We don't need, or maybe we have TikTok still, right? We don't need to actually learn anything because somebody on TikTok is going to tell us. But in the past, the understanding had been the board took a hands-off approach to non-resident tax professionals that didn't have an Oregon office, think Nexus, importantly, who didn't solicit clients in Oregon. I'm not trying to get a client in Oregon. This appears to have changed around late 2021, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. Okay, so there's a couple of questions here where they ask about fines, and we're going to talk about fines, and we're going to talk about exemptions. So some of the questions, if you'll just hold off for me. So Oregon law also mandates that an individual who prepares, advises, or assists in the preparation of an Oregon personal income tax return for compensation must be licensed by the Oregon Board of Tax Practitioners, regardless of residency. Okay, the law doesn't say regardless of residency. So that's a little bit of a embellishment by me, but they have expanded their definition. And if you prepare an Oregon return, the argument is you should be licensed. I meant to put up a poll, but maybe Nicole can pop up a poll for me just so we can find out designations, how many EAs, how many CPAs, how many attorneys we have on here, please, today. All right. So the requirement does apply to enrolled agents. We get used to being exempted. California, we're exempt. New York, as long as you don't do a settlement product, a refund anticipation loan, you're exempt. Oregon does not love us as much as the other states. So those of you that are enrolled agents, you don't have an automatic exemption. EAs are permitted to represent taxpayers before the IRS. They must obtain an Oregon tax consultant or tax preparer license to legally prepare returns in Oregon unless they qualify for an exemption. We're going to talk about this, and they're applying this to the entire world. And as Susan Gallagher-Smith has correctly pointed out in social media, we have some chats going on in some of my groups. Susan has correctly said that an enrolled agent is about representation. It's a license to represent taxpayers before exam, collection, appeals. It is not a license to prepare tax returns. And in fact, we saw that in Loving versus Commissioner when we had tried to have the RTRP program and there was the lawsuit. It came up that Circular 230 didn't apply at the time to tax preparation. So I hate when we talk about all of these legal things. So I'll remind you, the three of us are all licensed. To become licensed, non-resident professionals must meet Oregon-specific education, experience, and examination requirements. Non-compliance can result in civil penalties, disciplinary action, prohibitions on tax prep services within the state. It's a bunch of good stuff coming up here. Oh, and Donna points out to me Susan is visiting today. She is here. Hopefully I didn't misquote her. All right. Who needs a license? Anyone who prepares, advises, assists in preparing personal income tax returns in Oregon for valuable consideration must be licensed as a tax consultant or a tax preparer unless specifically exempted. The definition of valuable consideration includes any benefit received, not just monetary compensation. So there was a question on the quiz. Somebody buys you lunch for preparing a return. Do you need to be licensed? I wanted to write it depends on whether I liked the lunch or not. Come on, that was funny. All right. All right. Who needs a license? The statutes and the rules don't explicitly differentiate on requirements for residents and non-residents. There's one part in the law enabling legislation, not the regulations, that seems to suggest thank you, Donna, for pointing this part out, seems to suggest that it is for what goes on in Oregon only, but that's the only place it talks about geography. So it's implied that non-residents providing services to Oregon taxpayers for valuable consideration, the defined version of valuable consideration, must also be licensed unless they're exempt. Non-residents accepting a license appoint the Secretary of State as their agent for service of process. Very interesting, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Hello, Eve. All right. So who's exempt? This is the most important thing. If I work for an employer and part of my job is to do the tax return, I'm exempt. Attorneys rendering services within their legal duties, exempt. Fiduciaries and their employees acting on behalf of the estate or beneficiary, exempt. Now, I added the emphasis here. Certified public accountants with active permits from any state. So let's process that. If you're a CPA anywhere in the United States, you're exempt. Public accountants with valid Oregon permits and registered public accounting firms. Now we go back to this public accountants. You know, public accountants are a very specific thing. I don't call myself a public accountant. Depending on the state, you need to look at the rules. So don't say, oh, I'm an accountant. You're not. You're not a public accountant under Oregon law. Employees of the above mentioned CPAs, public accountants, and firms are also exempt. Government employees in their official capacity, exempt. Who's not listed? Enrolled agents. Yeah. Hey, Nicole, did that poll launch or do we have to launch it? Thank you.
I'm sorry, John, did you call me?
Yeah, can we launch? Is that poll launched?
Yes.
Okay.
You should be able to see the results.
Okay, I see that. So for everybody here, 75% of the attendees are enrolled agents, 13% are CPAs, 2%, I'm so sorry, are attorneys, and 11% are tax pros. So, all right. So I judged who was going to attend fairly well. So we'll zip through this then. But I have content here for all of you. So please be patient. I promise. All right. All right. Now, the board can also issue a license to individuals licensed in other states with substantially similar requirements, provided they pass the state-specific exam, same as enrolled agents. We're eligible for licensure upon passing the state portion of the consultant exam. All right. Now, I put you this, I want to put this piece up just quickly. So if you are not licensed in Oregon and you're not a Circular 230 person, the 11% of you that said you're not EAs, CPAs, attorneys, what do I need to do to be able to prepare an Oregon tax return? 18 years of age, high school diploma or equivalent, 80 hours of approved education from one of their approved providers. We are not one. IRS PTIN number, that's easy, $19.50. Examination, you have to pass their board-administered exam on Oregon and federal personal income tax law. You don't need to go to Oregon. You can go to PSI and take that exam. You submit the application, the fee, proof of your qualifications. Now, you're limited. You have to work for a certified public accountant or a licensed tax consultant. You can't hang your own shingle out there. You've got to work for someone. Within the larger, broader thing here, Ed, within Block's organization outside of Oregon, nobody's an LTP, right? They're all EAs.
Correct. What they cited was software limitations. Basically says that they don't support a LPP, the preparer level, outside of Oregon because the requirements are you're supervised. And I think of it like an apprenticeship kind of mentality. You have to be available in the office for at least, I believe it's 50% of the hours
of the work
to
time,
supervise the people under you.
Yep. Yeah.
And therefore they don't have a good way to manage that. So they've made the decision at their level to say, we just will not allow LTPs outside of Oregon.
I think I agree with that, because that does get to be a little more dutiful. All right. So I hesitated putting this up there, and a couple of us spoke about it, and the opinion is that it was okay for me to put this up here. After spending 80 hours plus the study time to be able to do Oregon returns from out of state, should you consider becoming an enrolled agent? Again, if the goal here is I'm an experienced preparer and I want to be able to do Oregon returns, there are some people on here that are in Idaho, right, that are near enough to Eastern Oregon. They might have a bunch of clients to do returns for. This could be the impetus to become an enrolled agent. Okay. Now, a tax consultant, right? LTC, licensed tax consultant. Look at my email now. I'm in LTC with my 8-digit number or whatever it is. Qualifications, same as a tax preparer, plus 1,100 hours of documented experience in the 2 of the last 5 years. Sounds like Section 121 of the Internal Revenue Code. I have to work under the supervision of a tax consultant or an exempt individual. Volunteer experience can count towards part of the requirement. I have to have gotten 15 hours of continuing education within the year before my application. And then I have to pass a more rigorous board exam. And then you send in your application fee, proof of qualification. Okay. Now let's look real quick. There's just a bunch of questions here. I just want to clear this off. Hey, Ernie, what is the fine for not licensing? We're going to talk about some examples at the end, and all of the fines are published on their website. I mean, somebody got dinged $50 for not responding to them within 15 days as required. There's a couple of people with 5-figure penalties. There's a couple of people with that got disbarred. So we'll talk about that. But that's a good question, and that's that. I don't know that I agree with it, but that's a business decision, right? Well, if they're going to penalize me for the 2 I do, let them penalize me. It said personal income tax returns. So if we do business return only, then we don't need a license. Kimberly, you are correct, and that is a deficiency in what we have been putting here. A business return, 1120, 1120S, 1065, are not a 1040 series return, and they are therefore exempt. What do you guys say? A trust return, a gift tax return, the same thing, or no? Ed, Chad, what do you think?
Not sure on that one. I know they have the control of the software, so they have made it pretty restrictive at their end. So, my analysis was the corporate people have control, and they're basically treading very light water for reasons which I think you'll have in a future slide.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll talk about this whole thing. How would this ruling apply when the client lives in Washington but works in Oregon? We're only preparing a non-resident individual return. So, yeah, all right. So again, not putting aside, we'd like to see exemptions and things for a minute, right? If I have a K1, I have a client with a K1 that gets a small apportionment to Oregon because one of the partners is a vacation home there, and he has like $100 loss every year. Guess what? We're supposed to be licensed in Oregon. If you have a person with a publicly traded partnership with a passive loss they can't deduct, you're supposed to be licensed in Oregon. I don't make the rules. I'm merely reporting them. Now, one would think that even if licensing were to continue, that there could be some exemptions or some reasonable exemptions. Presently, we don't have that. How about this? What if you itemize your invoice and charge for a federal return, but don't charge for an Oregon return? How could they say you were a paid preparer? I was going to have Chad talk about that. What do you think? I have an answer, but you want to hit it, Ed?
Yeah, well, what I would say is Oregon has specifically said in communications that they consider the federal return part of the process, and therefore you cannot split a return and have an Oregon prepare only the Oregon, and a federal return prepared by a non-Oregon person. They actually said that they would consider both violations. The person preparing federal return as not being licensed, and the person preparing the Oregon return as failure to meet due diligence because they didn't prepare the federal return.
Right. And I mean, there's an argument there that says if I needed federal AGI to proceed on the Oregon return and do the additions and subtractions, there's an argument there. So I would say no, Owen. I hear you. There's an argument it's not for valuable consideration. I think, did you just mention the example, Ed? I was reading a question. Did you cover the example of I'm licensed in Oregon, so somebody else does the federal return, and I'm in the same office, I do the Oregon return, and that's also a no, right?
Correct. They've said that both certainly they have said that both is not allowed to split a return like that.
Right. Yep.
We've from the standpoint of what's going on, also they have restrictions that they've been running in the offices, even in Oregon, about how much work somebody who's not licensed can perform, even like Scribner work. Don't even open the return. Don't just type the W-2s into the system, that kind of work.
That we know as well. They can't do the data entry type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, even without making decisions. So.
All right. So this is a good question. Does getting a license cause you to establish nexus in Oregon? So when I went to register, there's a reduced fee if you register your business and your tax consultant license at the same time. So the first thing it says is put your name on it. The second thing is it asks for your business name as it appears on the Oregon Department of State. So I shook my head and said, this is going to cost me a fortune. But so what I'm going to suggest in several places today is that you email the board when you have a question. I emailed the board and said, this is who I am. I have an entity. It's just me that's going to be doing Oregon returns and have a license right now. I have no intention to open an office 3,000 miles from where I live. And although I occasionally visit Oregon, I'm not coming there to do work. And the reply I got back was surprising. Just register you. So, Therese, I would say the normal Nexus rules apply. Just because you have the license, you're going to register just you, not your business. You're not going to go there. Now, those rules might change if you are specifically soliciting business in Oregon. All right. So I'm going to limit this answer to, I want to limit that answer to, I'm a non-resident preparer worried about my existing clients, right? I'm not soliciting clients from Oregon. But otherwise that might change my answer. Right. Oh boy, lots of folks. I prepare one return and gets the family discount of 0. Do I need to be licensed? If you're not charging for either return, I'm going to say no. What do you think, Ed or Chad?
Probably correct, but I would say that would be a great question to send to the board. And then because they seem to be very communicative by email, and then save that answer in case anything comes up in the future.
Is Oregon a direct file state?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Oh, if it is, that might be my answer too. Okay. Samantha, hello, Samantha. Samantha is in Pennsylvania, a CPA in Pennsylvania. I read online that you are for CPA in a different state without an Oregon officer soliciting in Oregon. You don't have to register. Is that correct? That is correct. You have the Willy Wonka golden ticket, Samantha. Your CPA certificate, your U.S. state issued CPA certificate appears to make you impenetrable. And we are also aware we're aware of at least 2 national chains that feel the same way. And I want to remind you that all of us that are here today, we're here for our own opinion. It's just us. This is our opinion of things, not anyone we work for or any organization we might be a member of. This is just us and our opinions. Does this apply to CPAs as well? We just answered that. What is a signed treasury card? Andrew is teasing. Andrew is a CPA in New York, but your EA card, right? The back, so you get that little card every 3 years. You are supposed to sign it on the back. You do send them a copy of this if you're going to take the state-only license. So that's what I did, and that's what they were happy to receive from me. Hello, Matthew. I'm curious about the cost and the renewal. I promise that's coming up. Enrolled agents are not required to get licensed to do Oregon returns. No, we are, but you have to get licensed. Kind of. You have to take the state-only portion of the exam, 50 questions. You have to get a 75%. We'll talk about that in a minute. David is in California. Has any preparer taken the Oregon only test? The 3 of us have, among other people. I just took it. I took it last week. Got my license in an email today. What kind of questions are they asking? Which of these items would be an addition to the Oregon AGI? And one of them was New York State tax exempt interest. All right, they it's the usual stuff. They were testing additions, subtractions, itemized deductions. When can you itemize? When does it make sense to itemize? If I itemized in the federal, do I itemize in the state? If I'm married filing separately and the spouse itemized, do I itemize? I was surprised because there's a lot of credits. They did not ask a great deal about the credits. There was really nothing surprising on it. And then they ask about 11. Is it 11% or 22? I think it's 22% is regulations, right? So 11 questions were on regulation. And that part I made sure that I read 35 pages of regulations to make sure I understood them. And those questions were some of the stuff we've just covered. Who can do a return unsupervised? Who needs to be supervised? What Ed said earlier about,
I will say that the exam bulletin does give like a percentage of content on the various topics. It even gives you a few sample type questions, and I found that was very indicative of the level of the actual exam.
We put that in here. There's a document called General Information Book on Exams 2024, and that had samples of both types of exams, the state-only exam and the licensed consultant exam. Now, one interesting thing is it's based on 2023 tax law. The exam runs from October 24 to September of 25, and it's based on 2023 law. So one of the things I stuck in here is the Oregon Publication 17. The 2023 version is there. That's not a mistake, right? And this is similar also to how the enrolled agent exam works. We can't flip the switch and update it immediately. It is not an open book test. In fact, if you're an enrolled agent and taking the state only portion, they give you the scratch paper when you walk in. Not open book at all. And David is asking, is there something on the Oregon website that we should read to prepare for the test? I gave you everything that's on the website, and the link to the website, I thought we were going to put it up here in the sticky chat for everybody. Maybe Nicole, Oregon Board of Tax Practitioners, I think it's tax.oregon.gov/OBTP or something like that. If you could just stick that up in the chat, the sticky chat. All right. So what's the big deal? The board is the authority to investigate violations, issue cease and desist orders, assess civil penalties, refuse to issue or renew your license, suspend or revoke, and reprimand you. It doesn't appear they have subpoena power, though, so you can tell them where to go. Things they're looking at: practicing without a license, negligence, incompetence, and they did penalize people for incompetence in the examples we're going to review. Dishonest conduct, failure to keep records, non-compliance with continuing education. I know people who have been audited. You have 15 days, I think, to get back to them. And in one case, somebody was fined $50. They won, right, with whatever the state wanted from them, the board wanted, but they didn't reply within 15 days. So they got a $50 penalty because the board found they could have replied within 15 days. They just didn't. And then there's a code of professional conduct, the usual behave yourself type thing. And if you violate that, they can sanction, penalize you as well. So all of these things, sadly, are on their website, right? So, it's I don't care that I had to pay a penalty. Just please, can I pay extra and keep my name off your website? Thank you very much, because your name goes on the website. All right. 10 penalties in the last 18 months, according to the website. There was one penalty that was pretty recent, so I have no reason to believe it's not up to date. So the $50 penalty for not replying within 15 days. One person filed 15 returns when they had a lapsed license, $1,950 penalty. 40 returns by a person who had been unlicensed for 5 years. $10,000, $750 penalty. Ignored the board, revocation of license. That's not fair. 322 returns prepared while unregistered and unlicensed. $15,000 penalty. Incompetence, $2,500 penalty and restitution to the client. Now, remember that a lot of these penalties, maybe all of them, arise from a complaint from a citizen. So in this case, there must have been an allegation. I didn't read the details. There must have been an allegation of you made a mistake and you didn't make good on it. And the board found that that was correct. So in addition to paying interest and penalty, it must have been severe enough beyond the normal, what's the word I want? Ministerial mistake, right? It was a severe enough mistake that they said, we need to send a message here and we'd like $2,500, please. Okay, a couple quick questions here. Deborah asks, is there an annual exam? No, there is not. Pass once, pay your fee. That's it, like the EA exam, like the CPA exam. When does this become a requirement? About 40 years ago? That about right? Chad, Ed?
Yeah, more or less.
More or less.
Didn't study that part.
Yeah, I didn't study that part either, but the answer is that this is nothing new. This has been around. Now, the enforcement, as I mentioned early on, the enforcement was selective is unfair, but it was pretty much understood. Non-resident preparer not soliciting into the state, right? Just people walk in, they have Oregon income, you do the return. No one was asking for anything. I mean, Ed, how many years were you at Block that nobody was asking for anything, right? You're in the Midwest.
About 16 to 18 years so far.
Right, and you could do an Oregon return without an issue.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, I want to be really clear. I've been accused of being judgmental before in the actions you take in your tax practice. And while I think that is very unfair, I want to say I am not judging today, right? The idea here is I was concerned enough that I'll tell you at this time at the end why I went and got licensed. But I said, man, how many people do we know that aren't licensed? And the answer is everybody except Ed and Chad. Everybody else you talk to did not have a non-resident, was not licensed as a non-resident, right? It's the same license, right? But people just weren't dealing with it, Chad's a little more obvious. The bulk of his 1040 work is probably Oregon residents at this point. But Ed's case, not so much, but he works at a large organization and they have to comply. So they have to have at least one person available to comply. So he got elected.
I mean, the big thing we had here was military bases. They have Oregon home of records, therefore they need Oregon returns. And I knew it's either go get this done or we have to pass them, and we don't have anywhere to necessarily send them. So that was
you know what's funny too. We heard that too, Ed. We've heard stories about people who can't get the return done anywhere, right? Because none of the big box stores will do it because they don't have a licensed person. But we also run into these issues where you said this to me in a conversation. I'm statutorily exempt from Oregon tax as an active duty military, but they took out withholding. I'm filing for my withholding. And anyway, yeah, we all want to comply. As the sole CPA in my firm, what qualifies someone as an employee? Is it anyone that I would supervise and manage? I would say yes. Now, you run into something that I can't answer for you is, are you supervising a subcontractor, a 1099 person? I know a number of larger firms that have, people who work from home. Long before COVID, they had the business model of people that work from home, and they're 1099 folks. So without commenting on worker classification, is that a person that the CPA can supervise if you meet all the other criteria? Now, I don't remember seeing an answer to that. This is something that I would ask the board about and just make sure. But otherwise, I mean, Eric, if you have a junior staff member who's an employee, or even an intern who's doing essentially key punch work, I think you're fine. So let me clarify that. My opinion, you're fine that you don't need to be licensed. You are not fine that you don't have to follow the supervisory rules. So you might want to just take a read. If you do a large number, if you were someone in Idaho and you were going to do, as a CPA in Idaho, going to do 50 returns, I would definitely want to make sure I fully understood the supervisory rules just in case. David again. When we register and take the tests, do we want to register as tax consultants or tax preparers? If you're an EA, you're going to register as a tax consultant. That's the higher license, and that is the one that allows you to take the exam, take the state-only exam, right? And I believe both Ed and Chad are tax consultants.
The idea behind the tax preparers, they are supervised by another person. Therefore, in most cases, if you go for that lower level of license, you're going to run into problems because, okay, who supervised you?
Right. That's not useful to you, right? If we're looking to be in compliance and not have a penalty, right? Not so recent penalty. April of 2023, H&R Block was fined $102,750. Now, this is a case from the fall of 2021. Fined $102,750 for one unlicensed tax preparer. There was also a penalty on the supervisor who missed it. They prepared 274 personal tax returns. So that's a pretty high bar that I'm your supervisor, even in a huge company. I better make sure you're licensed. And Ed doesn't have to comment on this, but I would think this is the impetus on Block, making sure people are licensed. And how do you make sure only a licensed person is doing returns? Show me your license. Lock everybody out unless you show me a license. And then I open it up for you when I have your current license. And at renewal time, I'm going to shut you off unless you show me your current license. Makes perfect sense as a large organization to protect yourself, at least in my opinion. Okay. All right. Annual obligations, some of you are asking. We're going to get to the money and a few things in a second. Licensees have to complete 30 hours of continuing education. If you're a subscriber here, you're doing that, but we call that June, right? By June, you've got your 30 hours in, right?
I do want to put a point on that, though.
You up?
The 30 hours is not the same scope. It's not a calendar year.
Oh, the May.
Therefore, you have to be careful what months you earn those hours if you're going to try to use them for dual purposes of your EA renewal as well as your Oregon renewal, because
Yeah.
there are certain time frames where they will not line up.
They also allow you a 13-month period. So the month of renewal, which is May, I believe May of this year and May of last year both count in the
Correct.
look.
However, you can't use that same credit for more than one period.
Correct. Yeah. But it gives you that little bit of flexibility. You get to the end of tax season. May is like December. You get there and you're like, oh my God, I'm short, right? Well, boom, go. But yeah, so you'd want to pay attention to that. But as you study for the license, you'll see those rules. You have to keep records of all prepared returns for at least 4 years, right? And in addition to the preparer license or consultant license, there is a business license if you are resident in the state. Now, something I didn't think to ask the board, and of course, maybe they're going to stop replying to me, I don't know, is if I'm soliciting clients, do I need to be registered? And you had a comment about that, Ed, you thought, right? With advertising?
Well, my first thought on advertising was they can fine you, and there is cases, if you look back in the disciplinary records, of people being fined for not reporting their license number on their advertising. I know my multi-large employer has extended that to business cards and similar things. So when I got my license, I was told, throw away all your business cards, get new ones, throw away, make sure you get your letterhead updated, all that kind of stuff. Once again, of course, they're talking to attorneys, and attorneys tend to be the most cautious, especially with a large organization. But it is something for consideration if you're doing advertising or what's on your business card. All of my business cards have my license number on it specifically because they make a big deal about it in the regulations.
Hey, Chad, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. So there's I'm
Okay.
going to put up a comment. Now, I don't want to put everybody to sleep, right? I got to convert it over here to Q&A. But I know you've got a good point on this, and you're going to laugh when you see it come up. I might FOIA the records for the 2021 Washington preparer who was disciplined. Patrick Dimmitt isn't here. I think that was someone who spoke on the NAEA call. But he had a good point in the NAEA roundtable about whether preparing one or a few returns as an out-of-state preparer creates sufficient nexus to be subject to the jurisdiction of Oregon courts. So you have a couple of whole separate things here, one of which would be, you'd have to go fight the nexus issue, right? You have to fight the law. But Chad, what did you do a FOIA request for anything?
Yeah, I did a public records request.
Right on their website,
did
right?
Get licensed. Sorry, what was that?
It was right on their website. Isn't there a button there to click?
There is, but it has a broken link. I told them about it months ago. It's still broken.
Okay. But anyway.
Anyways, I was curious about the licensing because, I've seen on social media, there's discussions unconstitutional or whatnot. I did it just so I wouldn't have to have a hassle with that Oregon employment opportunity. But after reading some of these, I reached out to the board and public records request, I said, give me all the records that this directive is based on. And it's from their FAQ on their website. It says anybody, anywhere has to be Oregon licensed if they do an Oregon return. And after months and months and months, they finally came back and said, that'll be 60 to 80 hours of work for our time. That'll be $6,000 if you want those records.
Yeah. So that's a good story, right? So yeah, Ish, yes, but no. And one thing I'll bring up, I know Donna's on here, so I'll be nice. But Donna Byrne is in Oregon and both an attorney and a retired law school professor, so she gets excited reading these things. And Donna did make one point. Before anybody can make any of these constitutional arguments, you need someone to get penalized. So if you would like to volunteer and do something wrong to get the penalty, by all means, maybe then you can proceed with a lawsuit, right, to protect you. So I hate to say it. I hope we never get to that point because I don't wish this on anybody. Right. Deborah, do we think EAs will be exempt in the future? My guess would be no, because although they're trying to do a legislative fix, some of the stakeholders, the EAs in Oregon, are not in favor of it. So I'm thinking that you're not going to see that happen, because when do laws change? When the constituents affected by it jump up and down and say this isn't fair. You're not hearing that. So what information do we supply for the 1,100-hour requirement if we're self-employed? I think that's in the material, so I don't know. But I would, again, going back, though, to the one thing we were saying, I would, if I was going to spend all this kind of time, take the test and do these other things, I would consider becoming an enrolled agent, and then that even mitigates some of this, negates it. Jeanette wants to know, EAs don't have to do the 80 hours. Do we have to do the 30? Yes, you have to do 30 every year. But keep in mind, as an enrolled agent, you're already doing 24.
I'd like to add a little comment to this.
Sure.
When they're talking about the 80-hour requirement, that is a basic income tax class that is approved by by the Oregon board, essentially. So that 80 hours is not 80 hours of CE and anything you want. That is essentially a prescribed licensed class.
Right.
For my national chain, if you have somebody in Oregon, they get a different class than the rest of the country to ensure that they meet those requirements.
As does Hewitt, as does Liberty, and it's they're all registered as schools under Oregon law to be able to offer the education and award the certificate. But yeah, all good questions. This is great stuff. All right. All right, we're getting a little down into the minutia here. Are the records we keep for the IRS the same as Oregon? Meaning name, social security number, address, type of return, or do they want more records? I think that's all. I'm not doing anything different. Ed, you're doing anything different? It's all digital.
No, it's all digital, like you said.
Yeah. Okay. So let's. I'm starting to. All right, we've been on for a bit, so let's get through this. The guys have a couple of points they're going to make. All right. So here's the renewal dates. Not going to put you to sleep with this. We said consultants with that May date, you kind of get May of this year, May of last year, 13-month look back for the CE. As Ed correctly points out, don't count your CE twice. And, they're very nice about calling, right? You can see the last entry there. You have a question, call us. They're a lot better with email. They get back to you within about 2 days. They're very good. Right. So here's the process where I took the exam. So, all right. Depending on your practice type, I think it's still possible to get this done right now before you get busy, depending. Or if you're really busy for the next 10 days and the latter part of the month is quiet, maybe you get it done then. So here's the link to Oregon's website, oregon.gov/OBTP, Oregon Board of Tax Practitioners. Click on the forms, click on Consultant State Only Exam app if you're an enrolled agent. Yes, there's an application to be pre-qualified. You answer 6 questions. You'll get them all right, I'm sure. Most of them are yes, no. You've got a good shot. You have to attach your Treasury card, Andrew, right? Your EA card. Pay $60. And then almost immediately, I got back an email that I was approved. And then I got an email from PSI. And it's $85 to register for the exam. And now, the neat thing about the exam, I thought I was going to have to go to Oregon. I didn't. You don't need to go to Oregon. You do have to go to PSI, which is like Prometric. And you take the exam there. So there were 50 questions on Oregon state law. From my perspective, some of you who know me well will not find humor in this. So I ran out of study time. I'll show you my timeline. I thought I was going to get time to study. We were too busy here. I didn't study. I didn't study enough. So I read the Oregon rules, section 800. That's in the handouts. I read the back of Pub 17 before I went in to take the exam. I said it might be neat to know the phase outs and standard deductions just in case. And I passed the exam. My point is that that's not recommended, but it's still doable. Shad, what do you think? anything to say about the exam? Now, you're in Utah. You had not done a lot of Oregon returns really before you went to work.
No.
Right.
And it's kind of like the EA exam. I got my EA before I actually started doing tax preparation. And there's a big difference between, theory and actual application. And I think it's the same way with these. My studying was set up the test. I think it was available 2 days after I looked for it. I'd studied 3 hours the night before and 1 hour the morning of, and I got that 75% I needed. So,
and at the end of the day,
it's not too difficult.
You're
but
still an LTC at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. C's get degrees, right?
Okay. Yep. All right. I see there's a request to not answer the questions till the end, so we're going to try and do that. What do you think, Ed?
When I did it, we had a group of H&R Block people that we formed a little Teams chat. Everybody who took it passed, because the pass rate is roughly 70 to 80 to 90+% for enrolled agents taking the state-only exam. What I found very useful was there's a website called Quizlet, and somebody had put out a big deck, even though it's probably several years old at this point. But the questions that I took almost aligned with that big deck of questions. So I was able to I was probably over-prepared. I got like a 95%. But the way I did it was kind of similar to the EA exam. Most people pass it, so keep that in mind. The people who don't pass the first time usually are going to pass it on the second. That is different from the LTP exam, where the pass rate 20, 30% by comparison. So it's much easier to become, as an enrolled agent, to just take the state-only exam and get through it, that process.
Excellent. All right. So I want to just get through the rest of the material for folks. So the timeline, this is my license. It came today. And since it's all public information, don't worry about it, right? If you go look me up on the state website, all that comes up. So we submitted the application to take the exam on December 27th. I got an out of office from them. I was approved to take it on January 14th. I did need to follow up. I scheduled the exam for January 29th, which was my choice to make sure I would have time to study. Submitted my license application, and I passed it on the 29th. So I submitted my license application on January 30th with a $125 fee, and I got the license today. So very quick timeline. I'm sure it's busy season. If you sent them an email and said, hey, I passed, I submitted everything, is there any way I can get the license a little quicker? I'm sure they would accommodate you or tell you it's okay to prepare returns. I don't know. But it was very quick timeline. All right. Those of you that think this isn't fair, what are they doing? NAEA listening call on January 29th. NAEA specifically believes all the EAs should be exempt from Oregon licensing. NAEA is considering a legislative approach. I'm not picking on NAEA here, right? The call was open to everybody. I'm not currently a member. Call was open to everyone, and this is what they're looking to do. So the 800-pound gorilla, the organization with your interests, with EA's interests in mind, this is what they're looking to do. Now, there's an upcoming bill on certified tax assistant. This is the only place I heard of it, no place else. And they were talking about what can be done to that. So I think they mean maybe it can get amended or get a rider. Now the difficulty that we're seeing is the Oregon legislature meets now. So it's difficult to rally you troops up. They meet during tax season, rally you folks up and say, hey, can we all get together at the Capitol? As Ed has said, H&R Block is requiring tax pros who do Oregon returns to get licensed. Liberty is providing CPAs at corporate to prepare a non-resident Oregon return. You don't want to get licensed, they'll take care of it for you. We had heard some tax software is requiring Oregon license for e-file. Other than Block's proprietary software, we didn't find any. Drake seems to let you override it. UltraTax adds a question. Are you actively soliciting Oregon returns? No, I'm not. It lets you file the return. Now, Access let me do the Oregon return. without the license in it. Intuit is requiring TurboTax Live experts, though, preparing Oregon returns to be licensed. Right? It's this brave new world too, where virtual work, right? I'm not in your office. I don't know where you are. They're requiring the licensing. So we're just about done. Those of you, I will be done by 5, and then I'm going to stay on and do all the questions and answers. But those of you that have to go at 5, when in doubt, email the board. They get back to you quickly. There's lots of stories out there about some are true, some are not true. Email the board. Be sure you're compliant. Maybe when in doubt, pass on the work. No one wants to do that, but there's Oregon folks out there that would do your work for you and not retain the client beyond the year you needed an Oregon return. When in doubt, refer it to a friend with an Oregon license or an exemption. And even if we don't like this, it's the law and the board's interpretation, and we all want to try and do that. Stay with that. So I'll give you one more pitch for our stuff, which is here, and I want to quickly go over the remaining open questions. If you guys can just give me a few minutes, people are already starting to drop off. So Susan is in Washington State. Hello, Susan. Does the special class apply to out-of-state EAs? Yeah, it's not. I don't think you need a class, Susan. I think you can read them. You can pass the tax court exam, which you did. You can pass this exam. Take a read, and I think you can in a weekend get through this. I really do. Is $85 the actual exam fee? Asks Matt. I believe I went and copied it. So yeah, that's what I paid per metric or a PSI. So you saw my total cost there, right? 60, 85, 125, and then I had to go to Poughkeepsie if you know the geography. Did I miss a change in the IRS requirements? What I remember is that we needed 16 per year and 72 in 3 years. Okay, that is true, but the average is 24 a year times the 3 years, right? So you have to get at least 16 every year and 72 in 3 years. Most of us get 24. The old NAEA rules, you had to get 30 a year. So most of us were probably attuned to getting 30 a year. Are the exam questions structured to be quickly or fairly benign? Give you 4 answers for an attribute that are each separated by $10. Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I think some of them were like, would the answer be 50, 720, 8,000? So they're pretty spaced out.
There was a question about the political contributions, and the answers were like 175, 50, and 25. I know I got that one wrong, but I was thinking, wow, that must be 100 for married, 50 for married filing separately, and whatever answer I came up with was one of the ones I got wrong. So yeah, I think you got to know your stuff, but they're definitely not looking to be tricky, Richard.
I'd like to also add that not all of them had 4 answers. There were true false when I took my exam.
Yeah, that's correct. There were a bunch of true false. That is correct.
Usually
as well.
more along the ethical rules and those kind of questions.
Yep. Hypothetical. I prepare a client's 1040 and 201. Client gets a letter from Oregon that some of his W-2 or 1099 income was subject to Oregon tax. He never gave me the copy. I suppose in that case, another preparer would have to do the Oregon return, but am I now at risk? I mean, in theory, but what are they going to do? Are they going to file a complaint to Oregon, Glenn? I don't think they would,
Well,
so
the Oregon return wasn't prepared.
Right. And here you just gave your reasonable cause, your argument. I didn't know he had Nexus. I didn't know that 1099 was for the other state. He had no travel costs. I'm sure you'd be fine. Otherwise we're all going to quit, right? Because we might get fined by Oregon one day. I'm trying to create an account on PSI, and it's insisting that I give an Oregon tax ID. Yeah. So what happens, Joyce, is you have to pay the $60 to Oregon, send in a copy of your license, your EA card, and they will then approve you for taking the exam. You'll get an email almost immediately from PSI. The Oregon email will have your student number, your test number, and you pop that in. So that's where you get the number. You have to pay the $60. Thank you for the information. I have to go now. Okay, yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of those coming up that I have to go now. You're welcome. Can I work for a CPA firm as a contractor and be exempt? We don't know. Donna Byrne posted she thought the law said employee. I think that and this is I think that if you work for a firm owned by a CPA, which might be your case, Lily, that person should contact the board and make sure they're good, right? But I think they would be, but they should reach out. I do. Kathy does try to get her 30 a year. Joyce says thank you. Do I understand, John, that the cost of this cost you a total of $270? That sounds about right, right? $60, $85, $125. So if that's $270, yeah. Plus, I had to go to Poughkeepsie. And ever since IBM stopped mainframe manufacturing in Poughkeepsie, we don't go to Poughkeepsie. What was the name of the website that was mentioned that had the Oregon test posted? I hope not the test. I hope sample questions.
No.
Quizlet.
Quizlet was right. It was more like they were designed as flashcards.
That's what Quizlet is. My daughter uses Quizlet. Yeah.
I just happened to stumble across one that had like 100 questions, and they were great. They're probably outdated, so somebody who passes can really help the community by updating the answers and all it does, I'm sure.
Oh, hey, so Lily, Donna posted that law for you. Hang on. Let me go to Q&A if you want
to. Did like a literal reading of it. It says employee.
Yep.
Not contractors.
Yep. Not agent. It doesn't say employee or agent, or it doesn't say agent, right?
Or
it says
supervisor.
Employee. Yeah. So any employee of a CPA, public accountant, or registered firm, right? So I agree. Employee probably means employee, but the smartest thing to do here is, if we're all looking to comply, the board should be happy you're looking to be voluntarily comply. I would have the appropriate CPA reach out with an email and say, here's our operating structure. Are we good? But thank you, Donna, for that. All those years in law school. And okay. Who are you trying to reach, Andrew? Oh, Donna? Oh. Okay. I think Donna is Donna at ashcreektax.com, maybe. Otherwise, email me, Andrew. I'll put you in touch. Yeah, and email me, Andrew. I'll put you in touch with her. All right. You guys have anything, gentlemen, before we close it up?
No, I think the big lesson is this thing can come as a shock. We went through internally at Block a year ago with the same sort of shock waves. We did get through it, and what we've seen now is that more people are registered, more people are licensed, and that's how we're handling it internally. I'm hoping long-term the NAEA and other stakeholders are successful with exemptions, but we can only control what's within our own sphere.
So I actually think the block was an interesting case. I was communicating with the board's attorney, trying to get clarification on this law where it says they have the power and authority to do this. They sent me the settlement agreement for H&R Block's case as the proof. And in there, as part of the settlement agreement, H&R Block agreed to have all locations licensed that do Oregon returns. So it didn't go to any judicial determination or anything like that. It was just an agreement between the board and H&R Block Corporate.
Okay,
so I've never seen that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, if you would circulate that over to me, Chad, that would be very appreciated.
Yeah.
So those asking, the consultant renewal, license renewal for a consultant is $125 a year. If you also had a business, the combination license is $225, but otherwise it's $125. So yeah, add this to your aggravating mini license fees. It is what it is. I hope you found this enjoyable. I was happy with the turnout. I want to thank Chad and Ed for coming out for me. because I think that's great too. But no, Joyce, the 100% the PSI tests are at PSI. I went to one. They're not online anymore. They were online during COVID. You do have to go to a PSI testing center to take the exam. But no big deal. Actually, Ed, you went during COVID. Did you have to go to PSI or was it at home?
No, I did go to PSI. I went to, it turned out that a lot of them are educational institutions because I was in a hurry to get it done in December. I wound up going to Oklahoma City to get it done. Whereas if I had been willing to wait until the schools reopened for the spring semester, I probably would have been able to do it right locally within Lawton at
oh, wow.
I forgot
Okay.
it was Votech or Cameron, but one of our local higher educational institutes.
Now, in Poughkeepsie, where Marist College and Vassar are, they actually, that place I went into where PSI was, is a company called Brain Seed that does it. They apparently do prometric testing, and they were also doing some of the testing for the schools. So it's very interesting that they had this little outsourced center, and depending whose exams you were doing, there were actually 2 separate rooms to go into. So I don't know if that's different computer structures or what. But all right. Thanks to all of you. Let me see if there's one more here in the Q&A before we close it up. And if I prepare the federal but have the mail in the state, would that work? We think no, Tina. We think that you're supposed to be licensed because you did the federal return for them.
FAQ says no. The same person has to prepare both.
Okay. Well, this question, right?
Yeah.
So we agree that she would have, it doesn't work, right? You have to be licensed if you do the work, if you do any of the work.
Yeah.
And then this simplifies my life. I did an Oregon return every other year, not worth my time. Oh, that's a healthy attitude, Mark. All right, everybody, it's been awesome. Guys, I really appreciate coming out. And the replay will be up within 24 hours if you need it or any of your friends need it. And thank you again.